And welcome, I'm Richard, Data Success Manager here at Dataedo, joined by Hubert from Metadata team in Poland. So we're here, we're going to talk about the 26.1 release today. We've got some exciting new features, some new functionality here to go over. As always, as we're talking, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and whichever one of us isn't talking, we'll manage those questions, and if it's appropriate, if it needs to be answered right then, interrupt and go on. So let's go ahead and jump in. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about data-aware classification or intelligent classification. We're going to talk about the first part of moving manual lineage capabilities into Portal. We'll talk about some new enhancements to the data quality functionality. Then Hubert will take over, talk about new connectors, improvements to existing connectors, and give us a sneak peek at what's coming in 26.2. And then we will have time at the end for more questions and answers. All right, so intelligent classification. This involves semantic data types. That's the whole point of how this works. In older versions, the way classification worked, I'm sure you know, it did pattern matching against the column names that were being tested. It did not look at data. The new system here has been updated, so it will look at 1,000 rows of data to determine the semantic type of all fields that it can. And then it will take those semantic types and map them. So example semantic types, things like email address, phone number, and so on. Then it will take those semantic types and map them to your sensitivity levels as those are defined by regulations such as GDPR, CCPA, and so on. So it will automatically assign those classification sensitivity levels. So let's go ahead and jump over and show you how that works. So here we are in Portal, of course. Let's start with just looking at the classification module. So the look of this has changed, and the content has been updated to show this semantic type basis for classification. This whole thing is searchable. You can look at it by data source and domains and so on. And as before, it does still give you this list of columns that have been classified.
So we did get a question from Jeeper asking how we can ensure it's read 1,000 rows only. What will happen if they have PII data?
So yes, it does look at the 1,000 rows. The only reason it would not look at 1,000 is if the table contains less rows than 1,000. So it will read up to 1,000 rows and then stop at that limit. In this process here, it will look at PII. That's the point of this, is it will look at that PII, identify that it is PII by the semantic type. That's the whole point. Dataedo does not store any of that data. It goes out and it's a query. It does some matching, some magic in the back end, where it identifies the semantic type and then uses that to map it to the sensitivity levels.
Gotcha.
Hopefully that answered the question there, Jiva.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. So yeah, you can look at this either as an overview there, where you're looking at all of the systems together, or all of the classifications together, or you can look at it by regulation, but like this, so you can kind of drill in and see what the situation is for each of your regulations that you're dealing with.
We had another question from Susan. Are the 1,000 rows a random selection from large tables?
Yes, it's a random selection of 1,000 rows.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Susan. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the setup of how classification is managed a little bit. So of course, this would be done by an administrator, someone with admin permission. And they're going to go first. Let's look first at system settings. Right here on the very first tab of system settings, you've got that toggle right there where you can enable or disable Dataedo from looking at that sensitive data potentially. So essentially, you're enabling or disabling intelligent classification. If you have this disabled like that, then of course it can't look at data, so it will revert, it will fall back to looking at or using the old system where it is pattern matching against those column names. All right, so I'm going to leave that on, obviously. Notice there is also the ability to turn off profiling to look at data. So you have that full control right there of whether or not Dataedo looks at data and some granularity. Now, if we go on to our schedule, I want to show something here. So per connection or per database here, we have the ability to toggle that classification on or off. So I could leave it on for everything except my data warehouse right there, have it turned off for that. So again, that's a way to protect some of your data sources if there's a reason to not allow the system to look at data in those systems. Of course, if you turn it off, it will again revert back to that old method of looking at the pattern matching against column names. All right, you have more control here. If we go back into catalog settings, you have more control here about actually managing the classification. So there are two new tabs here in catalog settings. We're going to go to classifications first. And this is where you choose which regulations you're going to enable in your system. So you can see right now, I've got these first 4 enabled, and the others, I've got them all turned off. And notice you can create custom classifications just like we did before. It's done right there. And you just go through that process like we did before in desktop, that you're doing it here in Portal. And you can, like I say, you can enable those or disable them. If I enable one, then it jumps up into that list. And next time that metadata refresh process runs, it would go ahead and process all of that and give me the classifications for those. And of course, you can remove them as needed. The other tab is the semantic types themselves. And this is where you actually define them. We have given you 100 of them out of the box. You can create more if there's needed. And you set up these rules to go with them. So for example, let's look at maybe city right there. And there are rules, there are different types of rules that you can set up here, but you go through and select those, and then you apply the sensitivity levels that correspond to that semantic type. That's how that mapping, that magic that I mentioned, that's how that happens. And notice you can create new rules. All of that capability still exists. Here, for example, you can change your rules. Here's your regex right there. You could edit that. Same as always, you can go ahead and have full control over all of that. All right, I'm going to close out of there. Let's go and look at an example again. I'm going to go back. I'm going to find a table. Let's go to the person table right here. And the place this stuff is shown to users is on the table. There's a summary right up here at the top with these badges right there. And you can see a hover of which columns have been classified for each of these different classifications. And it shows those. You can't edit them here. To edit, you're going to go to the column itself. So if we go, for example, to first name right there, again, we've got the badges. but this time we have the ability to edit those. So you could change this and set it wherever it needs to be. Note that if you change this, if you override this right here, that will preclude the automatic process from changing it back. So once you've changed it, you're set. You don't have to worry about losing it later on. Also, when you upgrade to 26.1, the classifications that you had before will be brought in here and they will be respected. So you don't need to think you have to redo all of that work. Yeah, that's really all I need to say about classification. Let's go on back right here. Next, we'll talk about manual data lineage being moved into Portal. Up till now, obviously, you could only work with manual lineage in the desktop. This is another step of us moving functionality that exists in desktop over into Portal. The ultimate goal is that at some point in the future, desktop will become obsolete because all of the functionality will exist in Portal. I don't have a firm projection of the date for that. My tentative projection right now is end of the year. It won't be before the end of the year. It may be later than that. It might be sometime in 2027, but it will not be before the end of this year. But like I say, this is a step towards getting all of the functionality over into Portal. All right, so let's show how this manual data lineage works. I'm going to go to an example, which is right here. We're going to look at this customer table. And if I go to my lineage, there we go. You can see that we have that table and we have a bunch of outflow or target tables from there. The place you turn on editing, right now it is turned on. You can see all these plus icons. You turn it on and off right here in the settings. So I can toggle between those and notice those icons do disappear and appear as needed. Obviously, when I started this up, I was already in edit mode. So it returns you to whatever mode you were in when you exit the last time. Now to add something, let's say I want to add an inflow into this table. Well, before I go there, I'll point out these lines. Dotted lines means that it's manual. Solid line means that it was made automatically. So just watch those and you'll see those dotted lines appearing. So to add another object over here, a table, I just click that button and I'm presented with this screen where I'm going to choose the table or object. We can have other kinds of objects here, but you choose the object that you want to connect there. So I'm going to choose something from the data warehouse right there, and that gives me that list. And then I can search for the table that I'm looking for. So I'm going to add this employee dim right there. And immediately we're given this page where we can do our column mapping. The easiest way to do this, of course, is to simply use the auto match. And we have different tolerances. I'm going to go with exact. And what it did is it looks at those column names and matches them to identical column names, exact match. If it didn't pick up everything, if there's some that have name changes or something like that, you can add that. You just hit add a new column pair right there, and you choose the source column and the target column, and you do it just like we did in desktop. It's the same process. If you have some in here that you don't want, you can delete them. You can delete that column mapping rule like that. And one more thing here, I started with the customer table and I added the employee table as an inflow. If you want, you can add a processor. You can identify a processor in between those. So I might go and choose procedure and then find the correct procedure, click it and add it in there. I'm not going to. I don't want a processor in this example. But you can very quickly add these in there. When you're finished, you simply add to lineage. If you didn't want to do any column mapping, you can skip it right there. But I'm going to add this. And immediately there I've got that new inflow table. Notice it is still in draft mode. I haven't saved it yet. But if we want to see the column mapping, we can do that. Notice all those dotted lines showing us that those were all done manually. And something else in 26.1 is, notice we do have these tags here in the lineage, giving us all sorts of information right on the lineage diagram. But when I'm finished here, I can save that. And I have that saved. It's no longer draft mode. If I want to go to view mode, there it is. It's no longer editable, and so on. So then you can work with it just like any other lineage. It was just created manually. If you make a mistake and you don't want this, you decide that it was not needed, go back into edit mode, and you can delete it right there. See that trash icon right there. So you can remove that, and there it is. It's gone. I'm going to stay in edit mode. Obviously, to do this, you need to have edit permission. You need to be a data steward or a Power Data steward in order to edit this data lineage. Okay, so that's adding inflow to an existing lineage. We already had a lineage diagram there. What if you have a situation where you're wanting to add it completely new, where there is no lineage pre-existing? You can do that too. So let's go ahead and choose, for example, this reseller table right there. And if I go to my lineage, there is no lineage yet. And so it gives me that option immediately, because I'm an editor, to go ahead and start that lineage. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to add that. I'm going to choose a table. I'm going to do the column mapping like that. Perfect. And I'm going to add that to the lineage, and it's done that quick. So it's really, really easy to do this mapping and get those things in there. So the ability to edit these, once you've saved them, it will be saved. Currently, you can't go back and edit this. You can delete it and start over. But if you had made a mistake in mapping or something, you can't delete it in this version. That will be added into the next version, where actually Hubert's going to talk about that more when we do the sneak peek. But I just wanted to mention, currently you can't edit this in this version. So if you make a mistake, delete it and just add it again. So there we go. So let's go back here. Data quality enhancements. The first one I want to talk about is this ability to change the number of failed rows that Dataedo saves. In the past, it has defaulted and been limited to 1,000. So if you had 1,050, it would save the first 1,000. The other 50 would be reported as failures, but it wouldn't give you that information on that failed tab in data quality. So you can now change this. You could set it to anything you want from 1 to 1 million. Don't go past 1 million. It does cap at 1 million. Just be aware that anything you save is going to be saved into your repository database. If it is sensitive information, it will be encrypted. But it will save that. And if you save 1 million rows and there's 1 million rows of failed information there, then that would have the potential of bloating your repository database. So be careful with your choice there, but you can choose that anything from 1 to 1 million. The other thing, yeah.
Really quickly, just going back to lineage, we had a question from Sing Fong.
Okay.
If I add the lineage on table A, will it also appear on the other table's lineage, say table B?
Yeah, so if I, in that example where I added the employee the dim to as an inflow to customer dim, I think it was, if I were to navigate to the employee dim, it would show that lineage going forward into the customer dim.
Perfect. And then we also just had another question on lineage. Does the manual lineage get pushed into Snowflake or only live in Dataedo?
It's live in Dataedo.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And one more question on lineage. Do we need to have an admin role to create the manual lineage?
No, you need to be a data steward or a Power Data steward, an editor. You don't need to be an admin.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. The other thing I wanted to show on this picture here is down here at the bottom, we have this source link option. You can now put a URL in there, and what that does is it makes that a live link against the values here in this column. So it allows people to be looking at the failed rows and immediately jump over to, say, the system where they can fix it. So it enables you to look at that, see information, correct it, whatever the use case is that you want. But that live link right there enables you to do that. It may be obvious, but I should say you set up both of these, your failed rows and your source link, while you are creating that rule instance. So it's part of that, and as such, it is specific to that rule. So you might have one rule that saves 10 rows and another rule that saves 1,500. It's not global, it's set up per rule. And obviously your source link needs to be per rule as well. Okay, the next thing to talk about here is in your rule instance grid in data quality. We have a few more options of columns that you can display in this grid, and those are shown here as the last three. This one, where it says last name is Latin letters, that is the description. When you create your rule instance, you have the option of adding a description. That is that column there. The next one to the right, all of those numbers, this is the number of failed rows. So you can see I have those 5 rule instances that failed. It gives me the count of the rows that failed for each of those. And then the final one is your dimension that the rule instance is assigned to. So you could sort by those or search for those and show me all of the validity rules, for example, those sorts of things. So it gives you more capability of what you actually display here in that grid. There are some other enhancements to the data quality. They're not as visible as what those 3 that I've shown you, but there are a few others that enable you to work with the data quality better. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Hubert.
Okay, so starting off with the connectors, in 26.1 we introduced 2 new connectors. Both are the Microsoft Fabric ones. The first MS Fabric Data Lakehouse. Capabilities for this connector are pretty similar to Azure Synapse Analytics connector, and the other one is the Fabric Data Factory. And here the features we support are pretty much the same like the Azure Data Factory connector. And those are the connectors that we added in this version. And going with improvements, the first one is Snowflake. We added new way of providing keeper authentication credentials into Dataedo, instead of users having to save the file on the agent machine and the path, which could be harder than just providing this private key content. Now users can provide it as a string. We save it into a repository, encrypt it, so it's safe, and they don't have to keep those files on the agent machine it's just easier to configure for the users. And it's also for the Snowflake Enterprise Lineage connector. The second change is in the SQL Server Integration Services connector. We heavily improved the how we handle lookup components. So if you are using those components in your SSIS environment, then you should see you should see big improvement in how they are handled, the lineage from them, and just how they are described inside of the Dataedo. And we also started creating the lineage for derived column transformation. So if you use those computed columns as the derived columns inside of your SSIS environment, then now you should see the lineage from our parser inside of the data lineage tab. Okay, this one is Redshift. We reorganized how we handle the procedures and functions for Redshift. So fixed, improved how we do the lineage for procedures. So if you rely on procedures to do the transformation part in your Redshift environment, then you should see the improvement of the automatic lineage created from procedures and functions. And if something is missing for you, then you can reach out to our support and we could look into it, what is happening in these scenarios, and fix it if there are some issues. Okay, the Power BI. Before this version, there were some issues for the Pro license workspaces. This was an issue from the provided SDK. And we weren't able just to fix it because it was on the Microsoft site. And in the meantime, Microsoft fixed this, and this fix was the part of our release. We upgraded the version of the SDK we are using, and now, if you previously had the issues with this serialization response error, you should try importing the Power BI in this release. Just as a note, Microsoft introduced a new bug in this version, so it's not 100% sure that will work. But we already make a note to the Microsoft that there is the bug how to reconstruct it, and we hope that they will fix it as soon as possible. And then we can also add this fix into Dataedo. Okay, for strategy 1 users, we introduced 4 new objects, 4 new information that are imported. Those are documents, SQL statements, content groups, and subscriptions. If we can, then we are parsing them and create the lineage for them. It's not all of those types possible, but for most of them, it's sure. And I see there is a question. Is the automatic lineage for Redshift just for other tables also in Redshift, or would there be also automatic lineage to reporting tool from the data warehouse? For the data warehouse, it mostly depends on the reporting tool, because Redshift does not store the information how the reporting is used, but if this is like Power BI, Tableau, the most common one, then we should be able to handle them. But it's mostly the question what the reporting tool is used there. And I see another question. Hi, are any plans to create Python connector? It depends what you mean by Python connector. You can do a lot of things in Python, and we just cannot understand the whole syntax to make the lineage. But for example, if you're using Airflow, then you should look into our Open Lineage connector, because we can do the lineage for Airflow workflows that are created through Python or some other ones. If it's something custom built, like you just connect into the database and do the inserts, then probably we will not be able to do that. If it's just the most Python with some just simple packages on top. Then you should also try Open Lineage, but you would have to define the events manually inside of your ETL pipelines. Okay, so with the strategy one, we introduced this new object types, new objects importing to Dataedo. So if you're using this connector, then you should see after you import the new objects inside of Dataedo documentation. The next one is pretty small, but it could influence the workflow of Dataedo much heavily, because we introduced links for not only reporting connectors, which we already did for your Power BI or Tableau. You could see the link to the report inside of the Dataedo, but now you can see also those kind of links to the source tool for Snowflake, Databricks, Azure Synapse Pipelines, Azure Data Factory, or Fabric Data Factory. It is also the part of the next release feature for our browser extension. We want to support those connectors with our browser extension. So if you're browsing Snowflake objects and you would like to see Dataedo documentation, you can just click on the browser extension, Dataedo browser extension, and see of the terms assigned, if it's something is sensitive or not, and other documentation inside of the plugin. But the plugin part is the next release one. For this release, it's just the URLs. And the last one is the interface tables wrapper with public API. So the interface tables are special tables inside of the Dataedo repository, which should be loaded by you if you want to bring some data that is not supported by Dataedo, like for example Python scripts. If you can have the information about what kind of object is created, what's done, you can bring them through interface table, and then we can synchronize it, we can parse them. So also if you, let's say, have all of the queries that run against your database and you want Dataedo to parse them and create the lineage based on them, you can load them through interface tables and trigger the import, and then we can import them, parse them, and create the lineage from them. So so that's the interface tables. And before this release, you would have to load those tables manually into the repository. It was for some users an issue because of security reasons. They didn't have access to the repository, to the SQL Server, or they were SaaS users. So we did the public API wrapper, and instead of loading them directly into Dataedo repository tables, you can load them through REST API data that Dataedo provides, and then this public API endpoints insert the data on its own, and then you can trigger an import. So it should be easier for some more automated pipelines to include that feature into their pipelines flows. Okay, and that's all from the meta connector changes. And going next with the sneak peek at 26.2. The first change is the manual lineage part 2. So we want to make all of the manual options of creating lineage, modifying it, deleting it in Portal by 26.2. And also, as a note, probably we will remove the options to create lineage manually in desktop app in 26.3. So one release after the Portal version should be complete. So in case you had some issues with this Portal version in 26.2, you can reach out to us, mention how you did it in desktop app. Maybe we could help you how to move into the Portal version of it, or we can introduce for you to make it easier with your flow, how you work with them. The next change is we completely refresh the year diagrams. Right now, if you have a lot of objects, like 50 or more, on your ear diagram inside of the Dataedo, this could look quite clunky. It's hard to tell what's happening there. And we are completely rebuilding the engine we are using for those diagrams. They will look completely different from now, much better. They handle because we already as has this implemented in our development version. It can handle easily 200 objects, and you can easily see what's happening. Of course, you have to zoom in if this is 200 objects, because this is 200 objects in one diagram. But still, it's gonna be much easier, and it's gonna make much more sense to navigate them. The next change is the export to Excel in Portal. So we are moving from desktop to Portal this feature, and also expanding it. It will not only handle just the tables, procedures, but it will also handle, for example, data products or areas. It should, with this 26.2 export version, you should be able to export mostly all of the objects that are right now supported into this Excel file. Okay, and the next one is the expanded browser extension. So like I said before, it is, for example, URL matching, and it will work with URLs that we provide for Snowflake Databricks. But also, if you create some manual object with this link, you got some custom tool your users are using, you can provide the URL part, beginning of it, inside of this manual, and then your users that are browsing this on this end tool, on this custom tool, they can just click on the extension and see what they are looking for, you documented inside of Dataedo. So it's not only for the automated connectors that do it on their own, but also you can manually create some objects that will be shown when you are browsing those different tools. The next one is the MCP server for Dataedo. The MCP is the Model Context Protocol. It is the interface for agents to be able to understand and communicate with other tools. So like we'll use user interface, we are using browser to see what Dataedo information has. It's not that easy for the agents to do this through user interface. And the MCP is the solution for that. This is standardized, so it should work with most of the most common AI tools. If you are using, for example, Microsoft Copilot, then it should be then you could be able to connect this MCP server to your Copilot agent, and then he can answer questions based on information inside of Dataedo repository. We are heavily migrating the connectors to Portal. We are planning more than 30 connectors to be migrated. So if some connectors are missing for you to be able to configure them just in Portal, instead of configuring them first in desktop app and then in Portal, in this new release 26.2, most of them should be in Portal, but just for you to make sure they are migrated, you can reach out to us and request that if we are able to move it, and we will try our best to move it also with 20 versions, so we can have it. The next one is the export metadata to sources. So right now, Dataedo only pulls data from the sources, and it's not pushing them back. There is the desktop feature that you can use to export description, but it's one-time event. It's not synchronization, and it's only the description. And what we are trying to do is for you to be able to export descriptions, classification, tags you created inside Dataedo to the sources itself. So the documentation on this other part is up to date. If you are running, for example, Snowflake Cortex, it relies on the metadata inside of the Snowflake. So it makes sense for you to also push this information to those source databases, warehouses. And this will be implemented into connectors one by one. It's not going to be like every connector now support this export feature, but probably in the first release it's going to be Snowflake and Databricks, and then based on your feedback, we will introduce more and more connectors with this feature. And I see there is a question. Will MCP integrate with Amazon Q IDE? The IDE? Yes, you will be able to integrate MCP, because it's not like the configuration part relies on those tools. Like you have to set up the connection inside of the Dataedo, not like SQL Server. So, but yes, you will be able to use the MCP with Amazon Q IDE or Cloud IDE. Okay, and the last feature is the framing key tester in Portal. This is also the feature we are migrating because it was already in the desktop app, and now we are bringing it into the Portal. And I wanted to mention it because it's helpful when you are doing the Steward Hub activities. And there is one of the sections where we recommend you some foreign keys based on the data we have. We can suggest you maybe here is a relationship that is undocumented, but we are never 100% sure, because we can be sure. You have to approve it, you have to check it on your own. But with this feature, it's going to be much easier to do this, because you can just run the tests if this relationship is true for those suggestions, and then suggestions that failed, you can just reject. Of course, you could still have some data quality issues, so the relationship should be true, but this is the data quality part, and this is why you should also maybe check those that failed. But in the most common cases, you could just reject all of those that fail and look into those that pass, and most likely that those pass are the right relationship, and you can just approve them and have much better documented relationships inside of your databases, and also it would work perfectly with refreshed relationship diagrams. And that's all from sneak peeks. And this is the part of QA. If you get any question, you can feel free to ask them on the chat.
Yeah, feel free to throw any questions that you have in the chat. Shiva had a question, how the export metadata sources works.
Okay, so the idea is there are few modes you can use. Probably the one you would like to use is to keep the most recent change. So at the first import, when you are importing first time the database into Dataedo, we bring the descriptions into Dataedo. But then if you change something inside of the Dataedo, and we will export it to the source database, so it is up to date. But if, for example, you change also this description inside of the database itself, so there is some kind of conflict, we are not gonna, unless you choose the other mode. We will ask you in the Steward Hub about which version you would like to use. So both of those descriptions are synchronized. If you don't want to make them synchronized, you can just turn off this feature. You don't have to use it. Maybe you want to have some more technical description inside of this tool and more business friendly inside of Dataedo. Okay, you can still do it. But in most cases, you would like to have them synchronized. You can also just turn this off for the descriptions, but let's say the tags, you would like to keep keep up to date, synchronize, and then we are just keeping the latest change. So also, if you change something and not in the Dataedo, we are bringing it and overriding it inside of the Dataedo, because that was the last change. And in the conflict, it is your decision.
Thank you, Hubert. Richard, if you want to go ahead and answer Vamsi's first question.
Sure. Is there a way to validate manual lineage added by a user in Dataedo? The way is you look at it and make sure that it's right. No, there's not an automatic way because we don't know what your process is. However, I believe there is on the roadmap a reporting capability, both for manual lineage and for automatic lineage, to report what was done. So, you know, if it goes through and tries to create automatic lineage, we want to have a report that helps you identify the gaps where automatic lineage wasn't created automatically. And same thing for manual, just that report, so you kind of know where you're at and what you've done. Back when I was a customer, automatic lineage didn't exist, and so I was creating everything manually, and I just went through them alphabetically. I didn't pick and choose at my lineage. I went through the list alphabetically and just kept a note where I was each day as I did that. So it's a bookkeeping thing. But yeah, we should still be seeing some reporting on that. Is there any approval workflow? No, there is not a workflow associated with manual lineage.
Thank you, Richard. And then we do have another question from Vamsi. If data classification is already configured in Snowflake, will it be exported to Dataedo?
They will be back in the 26.2 release, not in 26.1. We want to add this feature when we add the synchronization part also, because it's gonna make some changes how we have to handle those things, and we didn't want to make it the same way. It would be much harder and much more chance to make something wrong, and because it's quite sensitive data, like it's quite sensitive in the sense of that you want to make sure that it's right. We didn't want to make it as fast as possible, but let's make sure that it's correct. And we are introducing it with the export function in 26.2.
Thank you, Hubert. Another question from Jiva. I like to update 1,000 data source table objects descriptions from Portal. Is that possible? If not, any SQL scripts available to handle this? Any other possible alternatives here?
All right, so I'll take that one. Currently, you can do those in bulk in desktop. It's not in Portal yet, but it is absolutely on the roadmap to have those bulk processors in Portal. I don't have a timeline on that. Since they didn't appear on the sneak peek for 26.2, my guess is 26.3.
Thank you, Richard. If there's any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. As you can see on the screen, you do have a couple of different contacts that you can reach out to. Any support issues, feel free to reach out to support@dataedo.com. If you're a current customer and you have questions about licensing, you can reach out to myself at Jonathan@Dataedo. There's newcomers here interested in learning more about Dataedo. Patrick will be able to assist you with that. And then obviously for training, you can reach out to Richard at richard@dataedo.com. And then any general questions, feel free to send them to the general inbox as well. So it looks like there's no more questions. So we really appreciate everybody joining. Never mind, one more question. What authentication methods are available for accessing interface tables, REST API?
Okay, so it's the same as for our public API endpoints. I'm not sure about the process itself, but I believe you have to have some pretty high privilege to generate the token it is used for the authentication. It is not the user base. This is like the one token for whole Dataedo. Like it's not user based, but it's not my general area of knowledge, so I can be somewhere wrong here. But yeah, it's definitely the token. I believe it's the one token for the whole Dataedo.
It is. And someone with an admin role can generate that token because it's in system settings. So if you're not an admin, contact your admin, ask them to enable it and generate the token and give it back to you.
Perfect. See a lot of thank yous. Yes, Richard and Hubert, thank you guys so much for presenting this information on 26.1. We really appreciate everybody joining today, and feel free to reach out to us if you guys need anything. All right.
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.